You can track the insanity of society with the degree to which the currency is inflated. You can even do it in the Roman Empire. The amount of silver in the coin in the denarius, as it became less and less and less, Roman society became more and more crazy. And that's what's happening now with American society. It's the same thing. There's nothing new under the sun. The core of all the corruption, all of it, is the money itself. Always go back in time to the year before, the decade before, to the century before, and everything all stems from a commodity. And that commodity for a global economy is gold and silver. And everything ultimately goes back to them. So every fiat currency is really just another gold substitute or a promise to pay gold and silver in different ratios. So really everything, we talk about Exter's pyramid, it's all based on gold and silver. And we see this pyramid all the time. Everything on top of gold and silver is based on gold and silver. It's all has to be exchangeable for that, or it's worth nothing. What is the current dollar or the digital dollar or the CBDC or any other derivative? What is it all based on? It's based on gold and silver. I'm not trying to convince people who believe in the fiat system or whatever we call the fiat system. You have to understand where this all comes from and dig there.
You guys are in for a treat. I have on Coffee with Lynette a very wonderful guest, Rafi Farber. He is the end game investor. And as an investor, author, and proponent of the Austrian business cycle, he makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, all we really have to do is think about this stuff logically. But he began questioning economics as a child. So he's been looking at this and questioning it for a long time. And he pays great attention to the treasury market operations and the massive increase in the debt issuance and the impact that that has not just on the economy, but on society as a whole. I've listened to quite a few of his videos and found his perspective to be insightful and understandable, and his approach to community easy for many to implement, where you're not as insane as I am or have the ability to create your own community. He has a very simple way for you to create it right where you are, wherever that is. And so without further ado, I am so happy to welcome Rafi Farber with us today. The first question I want to ask you is why you do the work that you're doing.
Why I do the work that I'm doing? Well, the natural answer is that this is what I think about. I've seen the matrix of the corruption, and the corruption of Western society is blooming in pretty much every sector, whether it's education or medicine or academia, finance. And I can go back to I tell these stories a lot. Very briefly, I remember having these questions when I was a teenager. And I would ask certain things, and then I would get these strange answers, and they wouldn't really fit. And I'd be like, okay, I'll deal with that later. But the first struggle with inflation, and it didn't make sense to me, was I found a 1,000 shekel bill in my father's desk drawer, and I didn't know he was so rich. So I said, Abba, father, dad, you have this, you have 1,000 shekels, and a shekel was about three to $1 back then. This is like in the mid 90s. And he said, no, that shekel is worth nothing. It's the old shekel, because the shekel collapsed in inflation in 1984, and Israel says it's just a piece of paper now. So, and then I asked him, like, why do prices always go up? And then he said, well, that's how an economy grows. So, and then I tried to connect it back to the 1,000 shekel bill. That didn't make sense. And I kind of asked him, well, if prices always go up, isn't everything eventually going to be $1 million? And he had no answer. And then the next economics question I had was in my economics class, when I was a senior in high school, and the teacher said, she was explaining fiat money, that money used to be backed by gold, but now it has value because the government says it does. And then I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, what if people don't believe the government? It's like you're creating a loop there. And I was like, okay, I don't get it. I'll deal with that later. And then in 2012 or 2011, really, I found Ron Paul in a sort of offhanded way. I wasn't really into politics, American politics, that much, but I was looking up partial birth abortions because I didn't know what they were, and I didn't know why people were so angry about them. I didn't even know what it was. And then I ended up on ronpaul.com, and as an obstetrician, he was linking me to all these pictures of the procedure, and I was absolutely horrified. And I was like, who is this guy? So then he answered all my economics questions. And I was like, okay, this guy has the truth. I'm going to look it up. And then for the next 5 or 10 years, I was a Ron Paul guy. And then I started reading Rothbard and Mises. And this is what I think about. Now I see the matrix. I see, I've always, known that the corruption was going to spread. And then when it attacked me and my family personally with the medical tyranny, and we all know what I'm talking about, then I became obsessed, because now I'm under attack and my family's under attack and are trying to take my kids. And I kind of went into overdrive. And now I still see that the core of all the corruption, all of it, is the money itself. And I know that. And if we can get the inflation out of the system by going back to gold and silver, we will collapse the economic structure as we know it. And it's going to be difficult, but that's what we need to do. And we need to get the stackers to understand that, to rebuild society when this whole thing falls, because it's going to fall whether we stack or not. But we may as well be prepared monetarily.
Yes, exactly. And that's a really good point, because since the 70s, everything has been turned into a financial product. And that actually started long before. But once the central banks were in control, well, what do central banks know? They know debt and they know interest. So I absolutely agree with you. But, you have a very unique proposition in that you say that there's really no such thing as fiat money. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's just a simple logical point. And that really is the point that I try to hammer into the Austrian school, stacker, gold and silver, the whole coalition of people that we have that come from different perspectives, minimalist government people, libertarians, whatever. The problem is we use their terminology because we grew up with it, because that's what we understand. That's what we all grew up with. And you can see that they keep trying to change language on us. They're trying to get rid of the word women now, so that we stop using the word woman and we stop saying girl and boy. And then we suddenly don't know what a girl and boy is anyway. It's not going to go that far, I don't think. That's too basically biological to get anywhere. But they're going to try. So the problem with fiat money is that Mises, he's not the founder of the Austrian school, but he's really the guy who plugged in the micro concepts into the macro picture, and how Austrian school logic really extends out to the entire business cycle, the entire credit cycle. He makes a logical point that a government, just like price controls cannot work. A government cannot say TVs cost X, tables cost Y, cars cost Z, and we're just going to invent this currency, and that's what the prices are going to be. That's a price control of everything. And price controls can't work because supply and demand always shift and always change. And that's why prices divide labor, because it tells you how much of something exists or just how much people want it, and money clear, markets clear. So just like you can't set prices, a fiat money, what we call a fiat money, is not really a fiat money. It's a substitute for a previous price array, right? You can't, when you wake up in the morning, the only reason you know that how much work you have to do and how much you can spend is because you knew basically what it was the day before, and you can make an estimate, right? It's going to be a pretty close estimate. And if you're good at it, you make money, and if you're bad at it, you lose money. That's entrepreneurship. But there's no such thing as just introducing a money based on nothing, or a monetary medium of exchange based on nothing, and then just putting that in the economy and saying that would be fiat from above. That would be price controls of everything. Every new currency that exists is based on a pre-existing price array from the day before. So really, there's no such thing as money because of what Mises calls the regression principle. You have to go back in time. You always go back in time, the day before, to the year before, the decade before, to the century before. And everything all stems from a commodity. And that commodity for a global economy is gold and silver. So gold and silver fluctuate against each other, depending on their supply and demand. And everything ultimately goes back to them. So every fiat currency is really just another gold substitute, or a promise to pay gold and silver in different ratios. So really everything, we talk about Exter's pyramid, it's all based on gold and silver. And we see this pyramid all the time. But if you internalize it, that's physically, not physically, but conceptually, that's what it is. Everything on top of gold and silver is based on gold and silver. It's all has to be exchangeable for that, or it's worth nothing.
Yes, that is a really good point. So let's kind of jump just a teeny bit, because what the central banks are saying about the CBDCs, the way they're going to introduce it is that if you let us do CBDCs, then there will be no inflation. So essentially what you're saying, right, that there would be total price controls. Do you think that's possible? I mean, there'll be deflation if they do that, but
Well, inflation and deflation I see is a little bit differently. When you're talking about inflation, you're talking about price increases. Well, when they're saying there'll be no inflation, that's just pure BS.
right.
There'll be no price increases. Prices change all the time, every second of every day. They always change. And really, there's no qualitative difference, monetarily speaking, between a CBDC and a digital dollar today. Like when you go into your bank account and you see a number there, whether it's you have $10,000 in your checking account. Well, 10,000 what's like units of what? It's not $10,000 bills. It's not $110, $10 bills or $100 bills or whatever it is. It's a data. It's a digital piece of data in your bank account that says your bank account has units of this data. So what's the difference between that and a data that's backed by a blockchain? Right?
Right.
It's really the same thing monetarily. What the difference is only in the degree of totalitarian control of that unit. Because the CBDC, the central bank will have a bird's eye view of every single transaction, exactly where that unit goes, because they'll attach a code to every transaction. They'll see everything. You won't be able to do a damn thing with privacy, and that's really that's the tyranny of it. But still, the price units, the pricing array of a CBDC, let's say they introduce it, will be based off the current price array of current digital dollars that exists. It's just another layer of the pyramid. It is not a new pyramid. The mistake that people make is they see CBDC and it's terrifying. And I agree. I don't disagree that it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. But they see it as like a possible stability point of totalitarian evil that will be maintained, it will have its own stability. But people don't understand the nature of evil is that it consumes itself and it consumes everything it touches. So it's inherently unstable. And CBDC will only be the layer on top of that, on Yertle the Turtle's tower, or the Tower of Babel, or whatever they're building, and it will fall just like everything now will fall. I mean, I hope it falls before we get to CBDC, but if we do get to CBDC, it'll fall it will speed up whatever the process was of it falling in the first place. It's not going to be stable. It's not going to stay that way, and it will end.
Right. It's not the end game. It's part of the current game. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, so we're looking at Exeter's pyramid, right? And the foundation is commodity money, gold and silver. So you're talking to stackers and people are accumulating it. But if the global central banks have been raising the interest rates consistently on all of the money, but you say that higher interest rates actually cause the inflation. And what do people say? Well, you can't eat gold, you can't eat silver. So how do you connect those two? What the central banks globally are doing in a really coordinated manner, and then what you and I are doing, and lots of people out there that are watching, which is accumulating real money. Is that the battle?
Yeah, well, look, as I said, the core to all of the corruption and whatever people see different parts of the evil that's going on, right? We have doctors that see the medical evil. We have educators and academicians that see the academic evil. We have medical pharmaceuticals that are whistleblowers in that area, and they see that evil. There's so much, and we have the environmental people that understand, what they're trying to do with climate change and what the real problems are and how we can solve them. We see all these types of we see different things, but what I see is that the money controls it all. So what the central bankers, when people become so steeped in the system and so confident, right? The more evil people get, the more confident in the system that they get. They don't see what they're on top of. So the central bankers, I'm not sure. Maybe they do. I don't think they do. They don't seem to really understand it. But they don't understand that they are part of the pyramid. They're on it themselves. They're not controlling it from some outward, divine bird's eye view of the universe.
Oh.
They're a part of it.
Right.
They're right on top of the gold and silver. And when they inflate their money supply, they're making their pyramid more unstable. They're getting more power, yeah, but eventually they're going to fall over. So What they don't realize is they're part of the system, and we're digging underneath them without them even noticing. If we dig enough, and we dig that base of the pyramid enough that it gets thin enough that we have the gold, we have the money, and they have less of it, then they're going to fall over. So about, people you can't eat gold and silver. Well, you can't eat dollars. You can't eat any currency. You can't really eat any money. What you can do with money is you can divide goods and services. It doesn't matter how much food is on the planet, or how much housing is on the planet, or how much goods and services are on the planet entirely. If there's no way to divide them amongst people, you have a zombie apocalypse. You have a breakdown of the division of labor. And what does the breakdown of the division of labor come down to? It comes down to the fact that people don't have money to trade with, right? If you're part of a big division of labor and you know how to do this very specialized form of labor, or this very specialized service, and you don't have money to earn from that and then pay someone else for what you need, then you have to become self-sufficient. And people can't do that because they live in giant high-rise cities and they're all going to eat each other. So what you need to preserve a division of labor, which is what money does, is a money. And what is the current dollar, or the digital dollar, or the CBDC, or any other derivative? What is it all based on? It's based on gold and silver. It still is, because there's no such thing as a fiat money. So what we have to do, my job, what I'm doing, I'm not trying to convince people who believe in the fiat system, or whatever we call the fiat system. My job is to focus people who see one part of the evil. I'm going to redirect them to, okay, I agree that's evil. You can't fix that right now. You got to go at the core. You have to understand where this all comes from and dig there. And that's why we have to stack, not because we want to be rich. We want to be rich. That's great. What we want to do is speed up the end game before they get to CBDCs. Okay, that's what we need to do.
Or even, I mean, do you think that once they introduce the CBDCs, that's it? Then we're all just finished? We can't,
no, we're never finished. There's not, when I say end game, I don't mean the end of humanity. I mean it in a positive sense. I'm an optimist. We're not going to be finished. The story of evil, if you want to go to J.K. Rowling and her story of Harry Potter and Voldemort, right? He consumes himself at the end. But all good versus evil stories are the same thing. Evil eventually consumes itself, either when it becomes absolutely powerful and then collapses, or slowly, and then maybe the good people can fight back and win back what they have. We have cycles of this in history, but no,
lots.
Yeah, I mean, I also go back to this comment. I'm heavily invested mentally in Jewish philosophical sources. There's a better word for that. I study them. Okay, and one of the earliest Jewish philosophical treatise, where a rabbi sits down and says, okay, this is what life is about, and this is why we have the Torah, and this is why God told us in an organized book, was written about 800 of the Common Era. About 1300 years ago by a rabbi named Sadia Gaon, and he asks very basic questions in his book. And one of his basic questions is, why doesn't the Bible, why doesn't God allow us to steal? What's wrong with that? Okay, and he answers, he doesn't say, oh, because it's bad for your soul. He's a very logical man, so he says, well, if we were allowed to steal, then everyone would steal. Nobody would produce anything because they'd get their stuff stolen. We'd run out of stuff to steal and everyone would starve to death. Okay, so you cannot have society based on theft. You can have a society where some people steal and then you punish them, but you can't have a society where the core of that society is itself theft. That falls apart and then everybody dies from starvation and then you have to start over. But what is this society based on? What is Western society based on now? It's based on an inflationary system, which is theft.
Yeah, so, it is.
Logically, it has to collapse. And the only question is how many people will suffer and die before it does. And once it does, we can reorganize and we'll be okay. Now, the question is, do you want to survive that? If you do, get some gold and silver, help speed up the process and survive at the same time.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. But, can they kick the can down the road? A lot of people go, oh, well, they can just kick the can down the road. Well, what's your feeling on how, who knows how long? That's the biggest challenge, is exactly when is this going to happen? Because I don't know. I think people think they can go out the night before and get prepared for this. But what's your feeling on the can kicking?
Look, they've been kicking the can down the road since 1933. I'm counting from then because that's when the entire gold supply was pilfered by FDR. Yamach Shemo, may his name be erased. from then on, the inflation started at that point. 1971 was really just an admission that we've been inflating and we can't pay the gold anymore. So we're not going to pretend to have a static exchange rate between dollar and gold. Doesn't mean the exchange rate doesn't exist. It doesn't mean we're off the gold standard. We're still on the gold standard. The gold standard is the exchange rate between gold and the dollar. That's the gold standard. That's the gold window. We need to close the damn thing. So how long can they kick the can down the road? I don't know exactly. I don't think it's that many more years because for two reasons. First of all, we see the incredible waking up of many different sectors of society. I'm not talking about the majority. The majority are still asleep, but we don't need a majority. We need like 10-15% maximum. That's all we need. We need to be vocal, which is what we're doing. Which is the gold and silver community, the people that understand the matrix, even the people that understand the medical tyranny. Like I'm reading RFK's book now, and I was just woken up to the whole let's not use the bad keywords here,
right?
But the whole injection thing. I was only woken up to it based on what happened with the other disease that we had a pandemic about. And then I looked deeper into what's been happening in the past when I was, in high school, and they were talking about HIV and AIDS and this kind of stuff. And I'm reading and I'm like, I can't believe this is going on. And it was the same story, but it was much less understood then because there weren't all these media channels and people talking about it. People would write a book here and there about what's going on and what, Fauci's doing and this and that. But now a lot of people they saw what happened now and they're digging into the past and they see this is a whole picture that's been going on for decades. Whether it's the childhood schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing people wake up in much more massive waves now, and seeing different pieces of the puzzle connect to what we have now. And in terms of monetarily, if you can track the insanity of society with the degree to which the currency is inflated. You can even do it in the Roman Empire. You can track the amount of silver in the coin in the denarius as it became less and less and less. Roman society became more and more crazy. And that's what's happening now with American society. It's the same thing. There's nothing new under the sun. We're all going nuts. Everyone's going nuts, and we feel like we're trapped in a damn insane asylum, and everyone's acting crazy. And we're trying to reach out to each other and say, "Look, hi, I'm here. I know what you're talking about. You found me. I found you. I found a whole bunch of other people in Israel, and none of them understand all of it. But we all have a different part of the picture. And our goal, again, is to focus them on the core of it all, because that's what we understand. We're at the core of it. And we didn't understand everything that it was connected to until all this crazy stuff happened.
Right. Well, and so they're kind of tipping their hat. But, before what we were just talking about, before 2020, let us say, there was a rise of the public, right? Populism. And then, of course, it was quashed. But now it's rising up again. I mean, you live in Israel, so you know what's going on there, in France, in South America, I mean, all over the world, in the U.S. I mean, we're certainly not immune. What do you think about that? I mean, is that the public waking up? Is that...
Yeah, the public is waking up, but the public doesn't understand what's wrong.
Right.
It just understand, it's very unhappy. When people... I was talking about this in a class that I gave, that the derivatives of money, right? We use derivatives of money, derivatives upon derivatives upon derivatives of money. The farther away we get from real money, the more depressed we get. But it's the same thing with food. Like we don't eat real food anymore. We don't eat fruits, vegetables, and meat, which is basically what our diet's supposed to be. Just like eat a piece of broccoli, eat a fish, eat a hunk of beef, eat an apple, just the thing, right? Don't process it. I mean, a Coke is a concentrated, or a Coca-Cola or a soda, like a regular soda would be sugar, which is a molecule that your body uses. It's a food, but it's not itself a food. There's no like sugar tree. Like there's sugar cane, which is very little sugar in it, but you concentrate it and you put it in a drink and then you drink it. And then your body doesn't know what to do with it. You mess up your pancreas because it's never dealt with this stuff before in our millions of years of evolution. And all of a sudden, everybody's got diabetes. So the doctors say, instead of stop drinking Coke, well, why don't we just give you this drug so your pancreas can handle all this sugar? And then you think about it like, that doesn't make any sense. Just stop drinking the poison and eat regular food. How about that?
Yeah, what a concept.
So it makes everybody sick and depressed.
That's where
we are now, whether it has to do with
Well, I was going to say it also dumbs you down. It also blunts your ability to think critically,
Right.
which
Right. So
actually plays in.
right. So the people who understand that, they eat real food, and then they kind of wake up and see more of the corruption. And then if we can get them over to the money side, we can get them to start digging with us. We want to be, gold miners
Yeah.
digging under the foundation of this pyramid. Again, I keep going back to that. So we have more and more people waking up, and they can't kick the can down the road much longer, because the more people that wake up, the more people that will make up will get to our critical mass. And if you look at the money supply, it's going pretty much vertical, and not right now. Right now we're in a deflationary period. But it's eventually we hit a fault line where we hit the next financial crisis, and the Fed moves vertical again. So I think that we have one more financial crisis to go, and that'll be the end.
Okay. And why do you think that it'll be the end? I mean, I know why I
Because
think it'll be the end, but I want to know why you think it's going to be the end.
just I'd say mathematically, we still have a very high CPI, and what they say 3.2%. But if you this is what I wrote in the Endgame Investor in my last report. If you look at the biggest component of the CPI, it's owner's equivalent rent, which is a made up measure, but it's a derivative of reality. It has some truth to it. That's still at like 7.7%, and that goes down very, very slowly. So the next financial crisis, when it hits, the biggest and most stable and strongest measure of the CPI is still going to be at like 7%, and from there it's going to go way, way higher. So the next move up in the CPI is going to be supercharged, and at that point, people are going to start dumping the dollar and getting whatever they can for it, and then you start a hyperinflationary spiral. Once you start on an inflationary system, there's no stopping the end game, right?
Right.
You can only kick the can down the road so many times. The question is, can you do it once, two more times, three more times? I don't think they can do it more than once. And then if you push me hard enough, I'll just move to my religious instincts and say, too many people are being enslaved now. The planet is in too much of a peril. The demented people that are in charge are just too dangerous now, and we're in a global problem. And this is really God's planet; it's not ours. And He'll save it when He has to, as long as we do our part. And okay, I understand it doesn't appeal to everybody, but that's what I go to. And ultimately, I'm not in charge, and I'm just going to pray.
Right. Well, I'm going to say just be you, because everybody else is taken anyway, Rafi. You can only be you. But when you're looking at this, part of what I look at are the patterns and the cycles. And the assumption is that they want to keep kicking the can down the road. But I'm not so sure about that, because we're at the end of this current experiment. So they need to transition us into their next experiment, and they have to get us to comply and go along with it voluntarily. That's the way they do it. And you made such a good point earlier, was, well, what's the difference between a CBDC and a digital dollar, which is what they've gotten us used to over all these years, so that they get us to just accept that. But I
That's
don't.
the elimination of cash. The elimination of cash is really trying to get us from sort of the bottom of the pyramid, the dollar, to somewhere up higher in the pyramid, the CBDC. But it's putting us on a much bigger portion of the pyramid, but much higher from the base. So we're much more unstable. Putting us all there is just going to make it heavier.
Well, it's that stability. How unstable do you really think everything that they're doing? I mean, do you see an internal implosion right now? External is when everybody else sees it, but do you see an internal struggle with what's happening in the banking sector, what's happening in the political sector? I mean, look what just happened in Argentina.
Yeah. Okay. So that was what I was going to talk about before the connection got a little bit messed up. So the public does understand that something's wrong, but it doesn't understand what it is. Donald Trump, I'm not a Trump guy, but I understand where he came from. He came from like this unfocused, confused message of, we're angry and we don't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump also doesn't know what to do about it. That was clear when he, signed off on Operation Warp Speed, and he stood next to Fauci and he did everything that he did. And he was like, okay, lockdown, sure, whatever. I don't know. Like he got sucked into it because he doesn't understand what's going on. So the public understands that something's going on. We just have to focus them. And our RFK is not perfect either. He's got a lot of strange problems and 1980s Democrat problems. But I take a 1980s Democrat over what we have 1,000 times over, and you can tell he's more focused than Trump. He also understands that something very big is happening and something's very wrong. He doesn't understand money very well, but if you talk to the guy, he could probably understand it and then internalize it. I don't think Trump has the ability to do that. He's too far deep into the fiat system. But whether RFK wins or not, he can spread a message just like Ron Paul did. Right. And he can reach more people than Ron Paul did. And so yes, politically people were waking up. Argentina, I don't know what the hell that was. That just like came onto my radar just suddenly. I didn't even know what was going on in Argentina. All of a sudden, this Rothbardian had won a primary. I'm like, okay. I'm not the guy that thinks that politics is going to save us.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I don't think that somebody's going to come in charge and is going to be a messianic figure and save humanity because he's a politician. But I do think that politics can focus people's communication and messaging. That's what Ron Paul did, even though he didn't save us by being in charge of anything. He focused the libertarian movement into something that made sense.
Yes.
And RFK can focus he might not win, but he can focus the medical dissidents and the environmental dissidents into something that makes more sense. And then the next guy can focus it more, and then eventually we'll come out of it with their help, whether they win or not. They're public messengers. That's what they are. So I wish them luck, and hopefully they can change something politically. I don't know if they can, but they can definitely focus the conversation on what we need to be talking about.
Yeah, that's really important. But a lot of people think that the BRICS, this meeting that's coming up, that they're going to back a BRICS currency with gold. Do you have any opinions on that and what you think, whether or not that will save us?
I don't think it's going to save us. I don't think it's even anything. I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, fine. I'm not like a political insider. I don't know what's going on. I don't have any friends that are giving me phone calls from the BRICS meetings. I'm just analyzing this logically. First of all, I really hope it doesn't work, because as bad as America is, as bad as the United States is right now, I really don't want China in charge of everything, because they don't even have a Western tradition of liberty as even a previous value in their generations. They don't value liberty at all. It's not even a thing. So if China is really the superpower in the world, we're pretty much screwed. We're never screwed, totally. But Xi Jinping being in charge because he has the money is a terrifying prospect, even more terrifying than Putin, I think. But logically, I don't think that it's sort of like when big states or blocks of states negotiate these trade deals, and they're all complicated, and this and that and this tariff and that tariff, or Brexit, and like how exactly is it going to work, and all these details make no sense to anybody, and they're all just there to obfuscate. The thing is, look, if you want to trade in gold, okay? You want something, go pay for it in gold. Ship the gold, or have 100% backed substitute for it, and then credit the gold to somebody. Just trade in gold. You don't have to make this complicated currency system of whatever, and then and back it with gold. This is all nonsense. Trade in gold, just trade in gold. That's all you have to say. And anyway, you can't other countries cannot get out of the dollar by going to another currency. Because other currencies are derivatives of the dollar. It's like you're saying you're getting out of the pyramid by going to a higher layer. That doesn't make sense. So if these countries went to 100% backed gold currency, then they would be collapsing their whole trade systems. And what they really want is what the United States has now. The United States now has a right to print a bunch of digits and then hand them out to people and get a bunch of stuff, which is why America's so rich and everyone else is so poor. That's what they want. They don't want fair trade. Fair trade means that they lose their power, or they give their citizens power. They want the right to inflate, and that's what they're trying to do. And so I don't trust them. And if to even want gold as a trading mechanism, and they're not going to do it. So I don't even know what we're talking about.
Well, I'd agree with that. I brought it up because a lot of people think that they're going to magically just create this new currency and automatically back it by gold. I am on board with you. Even the BRICS banks said that it's about having the ability to trade with their own currency in the members' country. So it really is more about trade. But I had to ask you because a lot of people make this assumption and they think that it's just so easy. And I don't know. That's the part of the world that has been accumulating a lot of gold.
Yeah, I mean, good for them. They're accumulating gold, but it doesn't mean that when a central bank accumulates gold, the gold bugs get all excited. There's two reasons
Right.
not to get excited. First of all, you don't get excited because we don't want central banks to have gold, because I don't want them to have power because they're evil. I
Right.
want them to have no gold. I want the stackers to have gold. I want rich libertarian billionaires to have gold. That's what
Right.
I want. And second of all, when they're accumulating gold, if you look at the central banks of, let's say, Turkey, then they're excellent at trading gold. They bought gold at a low, they sold gold at a high. Good for them. So what? I mean, it doesn't stabilize their currency. Their currency is still hyperinflating garbage. A central bank can buy gold as much as it wants, but if it's using gold to sort of manipulate the value of their currency or their dollar exchange rate, then the gold is. So what if they have gold? It's just an asset that they're trying to manipulate. If they're buying gold for the eventual purpose of saying, okay, now we're going to make our currency, all the currency that still exists on our balance sheet, it's going to be exchangeable for the gold that we have on our balance sheet, then they have to all fire themselves and do nothing. And because we don't need them to do anything anymore, and they're just a gold substitute manager. So what do you need them for? They're not in the business of making themselves irrelevant. So their gold stocks and their gold hoarding doesn't even matter.
See, I think they're doing it so that they retain control and they can retain choice and they retain power against everybody else, which is the same reason why an individual should be accumulating gold and silver, right?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I agree with you on that. They're definitely trying to maintain power, which is why they're buying gold, but they don't know how to use it.
Right.
And even if they're trying to maintain power, the amount of gold that they can put in their central banks is nothing compared to what we can stack. How much gold is in private hands? A lot more than it's in the hands of central banks. And when currencies no longer work, then the public is going to have a lot more gold than these central banks can ever have. And by the way, their currencies are going to be in collapse, and the FOMC equivalents of each and every country might be lynched in the street, just like Mussolini was. I'm not saying that should happen. I'm not rooting for it. I'm not making any calls to violence. I'm saying they're going to be in trouble when their currencies collapse.
Yeah.
And good luck if they survive it.
Yeah. But you brought up Turkey, and Turkey is so interesting because they really went against the rest of the world and were lowering interest rates to fight inflation as all the other central banks were presumably raising interest rates to fight inflation. And you have such an interesting take on all of this, rates as far as it relates to inflation. Would you share that, please?
Okay. So if you look at people assume that the higher rates go, it's bad for gold. That's true in a very short-term mechanistic sense. If you look at any specific trading day and the Fed raises interest rates and then gold goes down, but it doesn't. It's
that's
not
spot
a
market.
Thing.
That's
Right.
spot gold, and there is a difference between the paper gold market. I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is a point that most people just and it isn't directed at you, but they refer to the spot market as gold, and that is a trading market where you can create as much gold that does not or ever will exist. The physical gold market is very different, and so are the prices. That's true supply and demand. I'm sorry to
Right.
to
Right. Okay, I agree with you on that too, and I can hone that point. But before I do, what I was saying about interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at 1978 to 1980, and that was the point where Volcker got in, and he said, look, we have to stop the money supply from growing. He basically said he wasn't hiking rates. He was trying to target a certain money supply growth rate.
Mm-hmm.
And he was using rates as his tool to do that. So he pushed rates as high as they needed to go in order to stop money from being created. And that's what he did. And during those times, gold went from what was it, $200 to $870 or whatever it was. Silver from about $6 to $50. And that was specifically when interest rates were being raised and raised and raised. But why were they being raised? They weren't being raised. They were being raised because they had to save the currency. That was like the fiat currency that we call it today. That was taking its first baby steps, and it almost fell off the rail back then. It would have been much better for us if it did. but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't. Volcker is not a hero; he's a villain. I mean, he's a hero in terms of responsibility, but he's a villain, not even knowing that he was, because he preserved the system that we're still in today. So on the longer term, higher interest rates, if they're being hiked in order to in a panic to save the currency, which you see certain third world central banks embarking upon when
Yeah,
their
well,
currency is under
Argentina
attack.
just supposedly did that, right?
Yeah,
The overnight
yeah,
rate
exactly.
crisis.
So if they're raising it and raising it and raising it because they're in a panic, then the public smells that fear and they just buy gold anyway.
Mm-hmm.
At that point they can't control it anymore. So yeah, about the spot gold market versus the gold market, here I what you're saying is true, and allow me in my way of thinking about it, I
Please,
can categorize it a little bit more exactly. There's
please.
two prices of gold. There's the commodity price of gold and there's the monetary price of gold.
Okay.
So the commodity price, when you're trading a gold futures market or a gold derivative, really it's the commodity price of gold. How much does a dentist need to pay to buy his gold supply for the fillings that he needs, or how much does a jeweler need to buy the gold for the jewelry that he needs to make. And the reason that we don't see shortages in the gold market for the commodity price is because the futures price is, it's pretty good for gold as a commodity, right? But what's the gold price for gold as a money? Well, that would be the 100% exchange rate between everyone who has dollars in any currency and the gold that's available. That's like $40,000-$50,000 an ounce. So if people are if everyone is exchanging their dollars for gold at the same time, then yeah, the futures market's going to crash. It's not going to work, because if gold is a money, then there's no need to trade gold futures. The gold futures market is designed to push down the monetary price of gold and only reveal the commodity price of gold. And once we demand gold as a money again, then the futures market breaks down entirely.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see that, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's such a lie.
Yeah.
And how many times can you be lied to when you do not know the truth?
Yeah, well, before 1974, there was no gold futures market because gold was the money. And what controlled the supply was how much it cost to dig it out of the ground. You didn't need futures to hedge that. It
Right.
didn't make sense.
Exactly. So do you think that we're going to, are the central banks able to control inflation with interest rates? Because I really, you have such an interesting perspective on raising rates versus lowering rates. And
Okay. So are they able to? They're able to bring down consumer prices for a while, because when central banks are raising interest rates, they're making people bankrupt who had a whole bunch of debt before. And when you make people bankrupt, their money goes away. Like their debt that was part of the money supply gets defaulted on, and the money supply falls for a little bit, which is what we're seeing now. And their demand for goods and services in the economy falls. So you see a collapse in demand due to the poverty that they are producing, or that they are revealing. Really, they're not producing it, they're revealing the lie. And for a while, the higher interest rates controls consumer prices. But then if you keep rates high enough for long enough, what you're going to do is you're going to push down supply even faster than you're going to destroy demand, right? It's going to bankrupt businesses, which are not going to be able to produce the same amount of stuff they were producing before. And then the supply of goods and services is going to shrink because of the higher interest rates. And then prices of things are going to go even higher. And that's the next wave. That's why it goes in waves. Hyperinflation goes in waves of hyperinflationary panic and hyperdeflationary panic, and the next financial crisis, and up and down and up. We've been going in those waves since 1971. They've been coming faster and faster and faster now, and we're at the final waves, I think.
well, I agree with you. And I wish we could keep going on because you're so interesting to talk about. But I want you to please explain to the people, number one, anything that we haven't talked about today that you really feel that they should know. And number two, how they can find you.
What you should know is just in terms of when the end game does happen. You probably want to be out of high-rise buildings, high-rise cities, and be, now. You don't want to be stuck in them when this happens, because all of a sudden everyone in the city is not going to have any purchasing power, and you're going to be in the middle of a big building and in the middle of millions of people. You don't want to be there. So move to either at least the suburbs, and if you're able to, then move out into the country. And I would say get to know people who have skills, farmers, carpenters, people who can work with their hands, people who you can trade with, and make a local economy now. You don't have to be like a crazy prepper. I'm not a sophisticated prepper or anything, but I have people's numbers in my phone. I don't know if the phone's gonna work, but I know where they are, and I'll be able to contact them hopefully. And I live in a remote area, and also have a bag of junk silver on you. Gold is useful for wealth preservation. It's not going to be useful on a retail level. So the first thing you need is junk silver bags, dimes, quarters, half dollars, that kind of thing, and just have a bag of it available. And if you can get a gun license, be armed just to be safe, so you can sleep at night. And don't worry about trading so much. Don't worry about whether gold's up one day, down one day. That's all just screw with your head. And where can you find me? You can find me at The Endgame Investor. You can put it into any search engine. You'll find it. It's on Seeking Alpha. And I write about 3-4 times a week with a weekend report. And what I do there is I focus people intellectually on what's going on, and the logic of what's going on, and why, despite all the volatility, this is still the direction we're going in. And I use examples from what's going on in the day or the week. From an Austrian school, logical, positivist perspective. And I also have a Patreon where I go into a more biblical angle on these concepts, and I go into monetary and economic and political examples from the Bible, from the Tanakh, from the Jewish Testament. And so we can know that these issues have been going on for 3,000 years, and people who appreciate the Bible and appreciate how society came to be can see these same things that are going on now, going on then, and it provides a bedrock of emotional, intellectual stability, whether or not you believe in it as a divine source of anything.
That really good point, and I love your approach to community. So I'm really glad that you brought it up, because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. But we've talked about so many other things. So it's even, I definitely am a prepper, so I'm kind of building my own community, but that's a great way to do it. If you're living somewhere, go and get to know your neighbor, go and find out what their skill sets are, develop your own skill sets, know a farmer that grows food, meat, all of those things, and create that relationship now while you still can, right? So that they know you, so that when you need them, if you don't have the ability, or you're not insane like I am trying to do it all yourself. With my community that I have been building, I mean, that's a great way to approach it. I take it very local, because that's what happens during either hyperinflation or deflation. Things get very local for a while. So Rafi, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so interesting, and I'd love to have you back on so that I can ask you more of the things we can talk about what's going on. I love your perspective.
Great, and I hope to have you on too on my channel. This is
Excellent.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the community, right? We have to. You made such a good point. We don't need everybody to know what's going on. We just need a very vocal minority, because people are waking up. They can feel that energy. And I was around during Volcker's time, and I remember that energy and what was happening. So yeah, it's just a repeat of history, and that helps you know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? To get prepared. So I hope everybody got as much out of this as I did, and go and visit Rafi on his channels and listen to his words. He's very, very bright. He's been studying this. He's got a great, unique perspective. And until nenext time, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.
Bye.